Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the conference. I hope you've had a great morning so far. As Emma introduced me, yes, I am the Chief Executive of Pro Manchester, which, for those of you who don't know, is the business representative organisation that represents the business community here in Greater Manchester. And I've worked with Lou for a long time now, so I was really pleased to be able to take part in this interview. So I'd like to just introduce Lou. Lou is the chair of the Greater Manchester Business Board. Lou began her career working for the WPP before founding Manchester-based digital design studio Magnetic North. In 2021, Magnetic North, acquired by Flux, created the UK's leading design and innovation consultancy, Magnetic, where Lou continues to be the Chief Creative Officer. Until October this year, Lou was also the director of ID Manchester, leading the team in the creation of Europe's most ambitious innovation district project. And there were some exciting announcements yesterday, so I'm sure we'll probably touch on that just later on in our conversation. Alongside her day job, Lou is the chair of the Greater Manchester Business Board, formerly the LEP, and an active angel investor with a particular focus on female founders. Lou was awarded an OBE in 2018 for services to the creative and digital economy. So please give a warm welcome to Lou. I have an abundance of questions that I'm going to ask Lou, but as with all of today's sessions, we are inviting the audience to take part. So please do have a think about what you would like to ask, either here in person or on the screen here as well. So we've got some questions for Lou. But we'll kickstart, Lou, if that's all right. If you wouldn't mind just sharing a few words why Manchester is a great place to innovate and do business, and how the financial services industry contributes to that innovation.
Yeah, with pleasure, hopefully everyone can hear me okay. So I think, it's interesting, you talked about the investment zone announcements yesterday, which obviously we've been heavily embedded in, and that's led us to a focus on advanced manufacturing and materials, which is actually incredibly broad because it covers everything from medtech through to textiles and a whole host of industries. I think, we've got this national push on innovation, a national push on science and technology, and an era of growth that I think, whichever flavour of government we end up with, we will achieve that ambition in some capacity. Manchester's got a really important part to play in that, and so we've been developing a really ambitious tech strategy, which we're now seeing play through. That began for us 15, 16 years ago. You were, as I was, in many of those conversations where we began to explain to the city leadership that you can think, yes, of the creative and digital vertical of creative and digital economy, but actually we need to think of our whole economy as powered by tech in 20 years. And a testament to Manchester's long-term strategy and long-term ambition, it began to put the building blocks in place in terms of skills, placemaking, capability, and early stage funding. So we're now Europe's fastest growing digital city. We're seeing that play through in terms of our strategy. The challenge for us now, against that national backdrop of an innovation agenda, is how do we go from being a significant European city to being a significant global city in the innovation agenda? And the reality is that's going to be a total ecosystem play. So place will be kind of important, and that's why the investment zone work is really critical to help power that. Skills are important, access to professional services and experienced people who can guide on that journey, as well as access to capital. So I think that there's a kind of more sophisticated ecosystem, I would describe it as, that we now need to grow to give ourselves that best chance of going from being, number one in Europe on many of those scores, as well as the other stuff that we know is really important to attract the talent, to keep the businesses. So being the most livable city in the UK, great transport, great schools, all of those things are really important as a kind of holistic wrapper. But actually, there's the sophistication of our capital markets, the sophistication of our access to capital, the advisors who can sit around the table and take those businesses from being 50 people to be 500 people, to be acquired by significant, you know, that kind of ecosystem, I think, is Manchester's next journey. So yeah, great to be hosting this event in Manchester today.
Fantastic. And a lot of the things actually you'll probably touch on within this. So in the past few years, we've continued to see growth in financial professional services across the UK's devolved areas, particularly in Manchester. The City UK's recent Enabling Growth report highlights the North West as the UK's second largest region in terms of employment in financial professional services. So what do you think makes Manchester an attractive location for financial services, and what would you like to see Manchester do more to continue attracting that kind of business?
Yeah, so I think some of what we just talked about there is part of that. I think Manchester's generally having a moment as a great place to come and build your business, work, live, bring up your family, bring your team, you know, and we're seeing that in abundance. And part of that is, again, this post-pandemic moment of people have, you know, stepped off the hamster wheel perhaps for 12 months and begun to think about their lives and what matters. And we score very highly on livability, on access to, you know, those things that have suddenly risen up the ranks. That's particularly prevalent in young talent. So we have a high and increasing graduate retention score here in the city for all of those reasons. Largely people want to stay here. 20 years ago, that was more of a challenge because we didn't necessarily have the businesses to keep people here, even though we ranked really highly in terms of wanting to stay. A lot of people, you know, including myself, had to travel somewhere else. I'm laughing because Miles and I went to school together. And
yes, I discovered this last night, actually.
Which makes it sound like we went to Eton or somewhere really pretty. We really didn't. It was, if you saw where we went to school, yeah, it's been quite a journey. But whereas I think now we've got a significant cluster of economies. So if you take tech, you know, when the BBC moved here 10 years ago, huge client of Magnetic North's, we knew people who were asked to make that move, and you were really making a decision to come and work for the BBC for the rest of your life because you were about to move your family, you were about to... Whereas now, you would be making that move thinking, well, I might work for the BBC for 2 years, then I might go and work for WPP for 2, you know, I might go and work for Booking.com, you know, so once you've got the scale of cluster, and of course, then you need the wraparound of all of the services that are going to support those businesses that are here and growing and ambitious. So I think we're seeing that catalytic effect combined with what we describe when we talk about our innovation ambition as a kind of social innovation alongside economic innovation. And that's Manchester's USP, is we will be brilliant at the science and tech piece. We've always been brilliant at that. We've, you know, given birth to the computer and all of those things. But we also gave votes to women. We fought against slavery. We abolished slavery law. You know, so there's a long-standing history of both of those forms of innovation. And I think if you look at our economic model, our growth strategy, and actually the business community from financial services through to tech that's here, they all care really passionately about that agenda. And again, that's really attractive for the kind of new generation of talent that's coming out that actually cares less about how much it's going to earn and more about what it's going to make and its legacy and you know, the kind of work that you're going to be asking people to do.
Yeah, it's quite incredible, isn't it, that you come into Manchester, and I live and breathe Manchester. I'm here every day, but still I see new things happening all of the time, and it's just so incredibly exciting. Yeah. You've kind of led quite nicely into question number 2, which is, given the globally competitive nature of the UK financial and professional services, acquiring skills and talent is a number one priority for all. So how can Manchester assure that it has a resilient skills ecosystem and with a diverse selection of skills and people?
Yeah, so I think, part of that we just talked about in terms of our place proposition. The universities are a massive asset for us. They attract international talent. This year we had 70,000 just to Manchester University applications for Chinese students. We can't accommodate that in a million years, but the highest concentration of students in Europe exists in Manchester. So we've already got that influx. If we can retain more of that, we get that great international lens, which in terms of, as you've seen in cities like London, the internationalisation of the line of sight, the ambition, that really helps. But, if Andy was here and as mayor, he would talk about the fact that in reality, only 35% of Greater Manchester's young people go to university. So 65% of our population are not going to find their career path through, those traditional academic routes. So part of our devolution deal, the Trailblazer devolution deal that you've been really integral in supporting, it is about greater control of things like our post-16 skills agenda. So how do we work with industries like the financial services industry to give kids who are 14, 15 and may not even know that those jobs exist, let alone know that they're open to them, and don't want to go to university or can't go to university, how do we give them that line of sight through our further education colleges? So, you know, what Andy will call our kind of industry-led skills agenda, how do we get better at that? Because that's the way we'll get 65% of our young people into those thriving jobs, as well as solving the demand side issues, which, you know, most sectors, because of the growth we're experiencing, whether that's social care, nursing, tech, financial services, everybody's really wrestling with where they're going to get the talent from. So we're doing this huge, ambitious project, which is the first of its kind in the country, to first of all get control of that skill system and have devolved powers and devolved budget. Now begin the huge task of working with industry to rewire the way that we deliver our sixth form education. So it's an insanely ambitious, but if we get that right, that absolutely catapults our economy into the next phase, makes it really attractive for more employers to be here, but also does that social innovation job that we talked about lifting the local population. Yeah,
Manchester's quite renowned for its ambitious targets, isn't it? in everything way. And I think Andy's mantra is, you know, it's kind of let's put these really, really high targets. Let's really strive to achieve the absolute best that we can. You know,
I've got the grey hair to prove
it. So, a question from. This is an interesting one. This one was for Miles, which I am going to sneak in there because it's good fun. Was Miles well behaved at school?
Was it really from Miles or was it somebody else? I'll be diplomatic to say he was as well behaved as I was. So.
Excellent. Well, then I would say, okay. The Greater Manchester area recently gained some devolved powers around international trade. How can Manchester best sell itself as a place to invest around the world, which markets and dystopia should be targeting?
Yeah, so I think when we have a really clear international strategy, actually, interestingly, one of the things we're learning in a post-Brexit economy and where we've got more control of our own way of marketing ourselves and those levers is that a lot of what we're looking at is city-to-city deals, and that's both nationally and internationally, and we find that sometimes quicker, sometimes easier to kind of man-mark or woman-mark places where there's a parallel economy. So, you know, you'll have seen Andy and the team out at South by Southwest last year. You look at Texas and Austin in particular and the kind of parallels in the tech economy there. So we've got some very clear priorities. Andy's out in Japan in a few weeks on a trade mission. We've got some very laser-like sector focuses. And the other thing we're doing, I mean, I was in Cambridge 3 weeks ago launching a partnership with Cambridge, and that's strategically, again, that's quite unparalleled. I mean, Manchester's talked for Cambridge, I think, 20 years, and we had several people tell us we couldn't do it. Actually, we have done it, and the way we've done it is by looking at how we're stronger together. So you know, Cambridge is obviously hugely significant academic and research hook globally, almost more growth than it can kind of cope with. The city council and the city leaders almost ending up in a kind of anti-growth mindset because they can't cope. There's 120,000 people there. We have 2.8 million people. So the complementarity of a very pure academic research capability alongside a more applied mentality here. Lots of space when those companies grow to build the factory, to build the future workforce, you know, to have that connectivity. Sure. And one of the work streams we've got at the minute with Julia Sutcliffe and the Department of Trade and Industry team there is beginning to put that on the global stage as a first co-joined city proposition. So actually, if we land 1,000 jobs in health tech, for example, we'll put 100 in Cambridge and 900 in Manchester. That's great for Cambridge. They want that. Yeah. That's great for us. And so I think actually holding hands within our own cities, within the UK, as much as then being smart about how we do that globally is, that will be a huge part of our work.
Yeah, fantastic. And so we'll see lots of more of that to come. So another question, lots of questions coming through, which is absolutely fantastic. Actually, shall I just open it up to the floor? Is there anybody in the audience here which would like to ask a question? Lovely. Do we have a microphone? Brilliant.
Great session. Your energy, Lou, is just, such a huge draw.
Try to dial it down.
No, I love it. Don't change. I think one thing that really struck me is the long-term vision that you're demonstrating for Manchester. And I'm just curious, what's the thought process to kind of figure out, these are the things, the big bets that we're going to go for that might take 10, 20 years?
Yeah. And
just making sure that you're betting on the right things.
Yeah, so I think there are some principles that have always sat under that. One is collaboration, and that's collaboration between the public and private sector, collaboration with academia increasingly, that triple helix that's going to power innovation. Again, if Andy was here, he would probably joke, because we've heard the joke enough, that there's we are the most politically stable part of the UK. So what's really interesting about political stability is it allows you to think 30 years ahead without worrying whether you're going to be re-elected. So actually, there's a kind of patient capital mindset almost that you get with that, because we know that if you're the leader of the city region, you can probably be around long enough to see some of your work play out. But I also think there's a kind of selflessness to that leadership, in that the seeds that you're planting, you're never going to see, or you're not going to be, your children will see. So I think we're quite good at that, of egoless leadership. We're blessed with the political continuity, bar a few bumps in the road, that allows us to do that. We're brilliant at collaboration. I mean, interestingly, Manchester as an all-red town has done better traditionally under a Tory government, which is testament actually to the fact that we're really quite good at turning up with pretty much anyone and holding hands and collaborating and working. So I think and part of that is being egoless, isn't it? So if you don't come in and chest puff and try and tell everybody how it's done, it's much easier to build those bridges. But I think we've just got good at that. And also, this is, I feel like I've had a whole day of this really, where everybody is literally one handshake away from each other. So it's like you can turn up in a city and say to Sam or me, it's like, I'm looking for somebody, and we'll go, I know exactly who you should talk to. And that within those two handshakes, you've found the people that you need. But I think, underpinning that is a strategy. What drives the strategy is evidence-based. So actually, whilst we might sometimes call it local industrial strategy when it's Theresa May and we're being driven by that, or we might call it our science superpower ambition or our science and tech, whatever that might be, the answer kind of is always the same, which is we've got a strong evidence base, and there's a piece of work called the Independent Prosperity Review that we do religiously as a kind of process to drive that data. And what that does is tell us the assets that we've got and where we can win. So the fact we've got the universities, the fact we've got huge strength in materials innovation, always leads us to the same answer, which is it's going to be a creative and digital economy, our green economy, our materials and manufacturing, our health innovation. And so we know really where our future strengths are going to be. But what that evidence base always does is tell us, it holds us to account on whether it's working. So the last Independent Prosperity Review told us we've been great at absolute growth, but absolutely appalling at the distribution. So this idea of trickle down, that we kind of went into the last strategy, we're saying, well, if a banker buys a £6 cappuccino in the city, that's going to help some kid in Gorton. Guess what? It doesn't. So actually, we're going to have to wire how that helps the kid in Gorton and allows them to go and employ that banker one day. So I think, and that's really what's driven that next era, as well as political leadership that's now saying, yes, the cranes and the absolute growth is important, but it only really matters if the distribution of that wealth works for those people who've not benefited over the last 25 years.
We've talked a lot about collaboration. Manchester is renowned and often celebrated for its very, very collaborative nature. So how do you think that we can improve on those existing links and build an attractive ecosystem here in Manchester? What more can we be doing?
I think there's a real pressure now on the next generation. So I think that's a great opportunity actually for people who are coming up through the industry, and often in financial sector, quite invisibly you sit between as the glue, you know, between and professional services generally, you know, sit as a kind of very quiet glue that pulls all of those people together and makes things happen. So I think there's a, you know, I just about remember being kind of singled out and people going, you're gonna be doing some of that stuff one day, and we're, you know, those people that we've all grown up together in that industry are now driving some of those strategies, but joining those people up now as young people and young communities coming through those various sectors and you know, the work that organisations like Pro Manchester do to bring those people together, that it's, you know, there's going to come a point where they're really critical, those connectivities, because they basically will be driving the strategies and building the city in the next way. So I think we've got to identify who those people are and give them the opportunity at the table. And I know Andy's particularly passionate on that, again, being a more inclusive way of doing that, providing the work shadowing, the placement opportunities, the bringing people in who don't have that in their household or don't know that those don't have the easy access to understand how they're going to get that pathway.
Yeah, brilliant. So we're heading into a sort of an interesting 12 months. What will be the key focuses for the Greater Manchester Business Board, and what role does the FPS sector play within that?
Yeah, so we've been through a really interesting moment. We've kind of liberated from the LEP framework through the Levelling Up White Paper, excuse me, which was, I mean, in many ways for Manchester, not a massive difference because we always operated in a really integrated way, and that's kind of the lead really that other business boards will take. We've reconstituted ourselves. We're about to announce an almost completely new business board, which will be there to drive the economy and the strategy. But my general view is we're into a real sleeves rolled up phase now. We've got a lot of those strategic frameworks in place. We're in for some political turbulence of whatever flavour ends up winning that battle. There will be turbulence and there will be change. I think levelling up is not delivered, is not done. There's a massive opportunity for, if I was any government, there's not going to be many places that actually in the next 5 years can deliver things that you can stand next to at a next election and say, look, we built this, we did this, and we're great at doing and delivering. So I think there's an obligation on Greater Manchester to get on and do and deliver, level up across ourselves. So actually we need as much opportunity in Oldham and in Rochdale out of which is why the investment zones announcement yesterday was really strategically significant. We have to wire the growth in a city centre to Atton Valley and Rochdale, and that's, you know, that's a big role for innovation. So we've got to drive growth. We've got to deliver on that inclusive model. If we do that, we'll be a global exemplar. You know, everybody's talking about inclusive innovation, inclusive growth. Nobody's doing it. We've got an opportunity to do that, and I think we're probably the best chance that any government's got of really delivering levelling up at scale.
Fantastic. One more question from here. Before I go to this one, does anyone else in the audience like to ask a question? Oh, excellent. Gentleman over there.
Hello, it's Rupert Daniels here from the Department of Business and Trade. I'm a colleague of Julia Sutcliffe, actually, so there's one handshake away there. I was interested what you were saying, particularly about the devolution deal, and you talk a lot about the connections with academia and university partnerships with Cambridge. I'm really interested in the further education sector and the development of skills for the sectors which you really need for the future workforce.
I missed the last bit of that, sorry.
I'm interested to understand why you're really focusing in on the devolution of further education and providing the skills for the workforce, and how important do you think that you can set your agenda for this particular region?
Yeah, so I think partly, you know, the focus on inclusion, so, you know, the idea that we're going to get everybody through the university is not going to be the answer, partly because in any forum that we have with almost any sector, the biggest problem, or certainly top three, is going to be skills shortages and access to talent. So I think in terms of just our inward investment proposition, let alone all of the other problems, if we can grow the skills pipeline, we can probably attract any business we want globally to the city region. But the single biggest inhibitor, possibly alongside access to capital, interesting, for most businesses who are here, is access to talent. So I think we're really focused on it for that reason, because it's that collision of, it's that Venn diagram, because I'm a mathematician, so I always work in some kind of, some statistical form of how can we solve our societal need, which is we've got sways, 1 in 3, in places 1 in 2 children growing up in poverty, which as your chair reminded us this morning at a different event, means they go to bed hungry and cold, they go to school without food in their belly, that's like, these are huge deprivation measures that we've got right on our doorstep. So the only way we solve that is by changing the life chances. At the same time, we're a pro-growth city, so we want to kind of join those two pieces together. So the only mechanism you've got is skills. Because of the way that government works, doing that, designing that at a national level for a local problem doesn't work. And so we've spent a long time persuading government, as we did with the health service, that if they can give us the levers and the controls, we can probably design that better for ourselves. I mean, with that comes a massive responsibility, right? We're now playing with the fortunes of 14 and 15-year-olds and whether we get that right. But I would probably back us more than I'd back the Department of Education. No, I wouldn't say that publicly, even though it says publicly. But.
We'll keep it to ourselves, we promise. This is, I think you've touched on this, but just as a final wrap-up question, because I know that we are going into lunch straight after this, and I'm sure everybody is hungry, but what are the potential obstructions to Manchester and North West future success, and how can the financial related special services tackle them?
So I think the access to capital piece, the access to grown-up, sophisticated financial advisors who've been on that journey. So I was with a business yesterday who, they were 200 people, that they grew as a family business, a tech business based in Cheadle. Then they got acquired by Uber. They're now 500 people. That journey that they've been on, they were surrounded by advisors and people who understood how to capitalize them, how to scale them, how to advise them on that journey, so they weren't phased. But I think there is probably 1 in 50 of those. So I think the caliber of advice that we can provide, the line of sight and the ambition, bringing that global talent that you will all have access to Manchester, helping to spread the word. I think we've got some massive challenges around transport connectivity. We won't go into the HS2 debate, but I think the more actually industries that are the more business voice generally, but in particularly this industry, can keep making the noise about the importance of transport investment, that actually these things pay huge dividends as we see globally in other cities. It seems almost ludicrous that we're still having that conversation, but we are. So I think the lobbying, and actually when it's most powerful, and I watched London and Partners do it at an event yesterday, London and Partners lobbying for why Manchester needs HS2 and why Manchester is way more powerful than me turning up at an event complaining about, the Piccadilly interchange, So I think collectively recognising, those levers is really important. But just generally being a champion, doing things like this, hosting, your event in this city, not in London, makes a massive difference. Yeah. It puts a big signpost about the capability that's here.
Yeah, brilliant. Although it's an absolute pleasure, and I would love to chat to you all day long. If you please will all thank Lou in the usual way.